So, good morning, everybody. Professor Kohei Saito, Xavi Bundó, membres de l'equip de govern, membres de la comunitat universitària, amigues i amics. És un plaer donar-vos la benvinguda avui a la Universitat Pompeu Fabra. Aquest esdeveniment, el que estem a punt d'iniciar, exemplifica el que una universitat sempre hauria de ser. Un lloc per al debat obert, el lliure intercanvi d'idees i una recerca rigorosa del coneixement. Estic especialment contenta de veure tants estudiants entre nosaltres perquè crec que vosaltres sou el cor de la universitat i el futur de la nostra societat. I la vostra participació en aquestes converses és essencial per construir el nostre món en el futur. Today we have the privilege to listen to one of the most important voices of our time. Professor Kohei Saito, he connects philosophy and ecological concerns in a deep and transformative way. I sincerely thank you, Professor Saito, for being here to share your thoughts with us. I also want to thank journalist Xavi Bundó for his collaboration. Journalism plays a crucial role in maintaining the truth and accuracy of information, and is especially important for strengthening critical thinking, particularly in a world often overwhelmed by misinformation. A la Universitat Pompeu Fabra veiem la universitat no només com un lloc per fomentar el coneixement, sinó com una institució amb una gran responsabilitat pública. Promovem el pensament crític, eduquem ciutadans lliures i busquem respostes als grans reptes globals que ens afecten a tots i a totes. El nostre temps exigeix no només un anàlisi, sinó també visió, responsabilitat i, sobretot, una ferma defensa de la llibertat per pensar i fer preguntes i discrepar. Entre aquests reptes globals, tots sabem que l'emergència climàtica destaca com un dels més urgents i complexos. L'obra del professor Saito ens recorda que les crisis ambientals són inseparables, totalment inseparables, dels sistemes socials, econòmics i polítics en què vivim. A la UPF això requereix un repensament profund de com organitzem les nostres societats i un compromís actiu amb la justícia social i la sostenibilitat. Estem decidits, de fet, aquí, a contribuir a aquest esforç. Un dels nostres projectes més ambiciosos és la futura Àgora de Barcelona per al benestar de la societat, un centre de recerca totalment interdisciplinari basat en el coneixement i centrat en l'acció. Aquesta iniciativa esdevindrà una eina única per donar suport a les administracions públiques i a totes les entitats de la nostra ciutat per crear societats millors, més justes i més resilients. Aquests dies també observem amb preocupació que el rol de la ciència està sota debat i discussió a tot el món, de fet. Fins i tot en un moment en què hem d'encarar, com dèiem, reptes urgents i globals com el canvi climàtic o la manca de recursos. És una paradoxa que la ciència, tan necessària avui, sigui víctima d'atacs que amenacen la seva independència i la seva potència. També ens preocupen els moviments polítics globals que qüestionen i menyspreen la llibertat acadèmica. Als Estats Units observem amb preocupació com les retallades en el finançament de la recerca, les restriccions en el moviment dels estudiants, les restriccions a la llibertat de càtedra, posen en risc el pensament crític i el progrés científic. Malauradament, veiem tendències similars també aquí, a Europa, amb grups i moviments que posen en qüestió la independència dels investigadors i de les línies de recerca. En aquesta situació és essencial defensar l'autonomia de les universitats, defensar el moviment lliure dels estudiants, defensar la llibertat acadèmica i el finançament públic per a la recerca. Els fons públics no són un luxe ni una opció. Garanteixen una formació i una recerca de qualitat, independent, rigorosa i estable. Una recerca impulsada per la curiositat científica, lliure de pressions polítiques. Més enllà de defensar la centralitat del coneixement i l'important paper que tenim les universitats, no podem ignorar el moment en què vivim. Patim temps greument difícils. La situació a la Franja de Gaza és una font de profunda preocupació i angoixa per a la nostra comunitat universitària. Com a universitat europea que som, defensem els principis fonamentals dels drets humans, el dret internacional i la protecció de la vida civil. L'escalada de la crisi humanitària, la devastadora matança de vides innocents i la destrucció generalitzada són inequívocament inacceptables. Un cop més, des de la Pompeu, demanem a les autoritats israelianes un cessament immediat dels atacs i que es permeti que l'ajuda humanitària arribi a aquells que la necessiten de manera urgent. La dignitat humana no només s'ha de proclamar, sinó que també s'ha de defensar activament. Dit això, Professor Saito's presence today reminds us that only dialogue, openness and interdisciplinary approaches can build a fairer, more conscious and sustainable society. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Professor Saito, for sharing your ideas and commitment. Thank you, Xavi Bundó, for guiding this important conversation. Welcome to the Pompeu Fabra University and hope we all enjoy this conversation. Moltíssimes gràcies i comencem l'acte.
Bé, magnífica rectora, comunitat acadèmica de la Pompeu Fabra. Bon dia, good morning, everyone. Thank you for your time. I believe we will do it in English, so everyone, I assume, I can understand. But I have to say, first of all, my English is quite poor, so I apologize. Yours too? Yeah. As a Japanese now?
Yeah, Japanese English.
Japanese don't speak good English?
No, it's unfortunate, but...
Catalans don't too. So as a journalist in radio station, I have to say that words are important, so I will struggle. So if you see me annoying, finding the concept, don't take it personally. So it's your time and interest. It's important because it's a pleasure to see this auditorium like this, precisely in a time and a place like we are living, when social anxiety towards the climate change is surprisingly coexisting with some rising voices around the world, whereas in government or political parties that deny it and act if it didn't exist. So my gratitude to everyone who was involved in this event. Thank you for letting me part of it, and of course to Professor Kohei Saito. Before presenting him, I have to say that for those who don't know Dr. Saito, don't let his age fool you, because he's one in front of you is one of the top thinkers and investigators about ecology and political economy under a Marxist view perspective in times where the idea of the collapse in nearly every single aspect of human life or human society is emerging in political, economic, social, environmental, technological, geostrategical meaning. Everything seems at this point like at stake. So maybe in the last, I have to say, maybe some of you have seen in the last weeks, because I've thought about it, a clip that became viral in Catalonia. It was a clip attached to a brief article from a Catalan audiovisual producer and influencer whose name is Albert Lloreta. Some weeks ago, he used a term that was coined like 20 years ago, named hypernormalization, to define the times we're living. Hypernormalization is a concept coined by Alexei Yurchak, a Russian-American historian and anthropologist, to define the feeling that in the late 80s in the Soviet Union appeared from everywhere in the population, when they all knew that the system was rot, the system was falling apart, it was breaking down, but as they couldn't imagine another type of regime or a system, they were just acting like everything was normal. Hyper-normalization. I think it's suitable for our times too. We are acting everyone knows something's wrong. A lot of things are wrong. We are on the verge of something big that can change absolutely our way of life, but we are acting like everything's normal and we can go through. Dr. Saito has made the contrary. He has focused on the problems and has traced or proposed a way of escape. Dr. Saito is currently an associate professor of philosophy at the University of Tokyo. He received his PhD from Humboldt University in Berlin, and his work about the idea, I think the main idea is that the growth communism has gained a remarkable worldwide attention. His book, Capital in the Anthropocene, aquí traduït com Una nova manera de viure el capital a l'era de l'antropocè, was an absolute hit in Japan and later all over the world. He has received several awards. And his studies, in fact, along with other researchers too, have rewritten in part or revisited in part Karl Marx's thoughts about capitalism and communism in an absolutely refreshing way, but also radical and controversial. To Mr. Saito, Marx was, in his later years, a pioneer in the growth perspective. In fact, that perspective, kind of the growth communism, is gaining strength in debates all over the world. So today is a real honor to lead a conversation with Dr. Kohei Saito. It's a pleasure for me. First of all, welcome to Barcelona, obviously, and Pompeu Fabra University. I have to say that I was really shocked discovering that in the book, the most quoted city in the world is Barcelona.
You should be happy.
I am happy. I'm absolutely happy. No, we are Catalans. We're shocked. We cannot be happy. When we're not
proud of you.
We feel proud, but we are not used to win. So we cannot be happy. So I was shocked. How's that? Why did you focus so much in Barcelona?
Oh, well, I mean, no, by the way, thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for UPF inviting me to this great opportunity. It's actually my first time to visit Barcelona.
Oh my God.
Despite...
So the next book will be absolutely all of Barcelona.
No more mention to Barcelona, but no, so I mean, in that sense, maybe I might have like idealized because this is based on what I read when I was writing this book. Actually, it was 2019-20, so it's not like very, it's like 5 years ago, so it's not like up to date in that sense, because I discussed things like Barcelona on Commune, Ada Clau, and maybe Albert Garçon, but these people are kind of, faded away from the...
You have arrived here thinking that Ada Colau is still the mayor?
Oh, yeah, I was hoping that she's going to just dominate and then transform
maybe,
the...
as I said to you before, maybe she will come back, but you never know with Ada Colau.
Yeah, I also wanted to see her and so on, but anyway, it was very interesting because... in some sense, I actually become more convinced of Barcelona's future. Of course, there's a lot of problems like gentrification and like housing crisis, over-tourism, and these are really manifestation of the logic of capitalist economy, right? The capitalism focuses on what is profitable and what is not which can be quite unnecessary, because housing is obviously important for everyone in the city, but housing is utilized for Airbnb and just utilized for other purposes rather than local people living there and so on. And then it becomes the target of investment, and these are all those things that created a demand or desire for transformation. And I think that the Ada Clau was a kind of moment of social transformation in the local level. So that gave me like very good hope, because I live in Japan, a society where things are even much more conservative, and we can't really expect something like revolution in the traditional sense. So I think it's in the 21st century, we cannot really imagine some kind of like Russian revolution anymore. And we don't also want to really repeat that kind of revolution either. So in that sense, where do we find some hints for social change? And I think it was very good. It's not just simply local, very small community, just creating some eco-villages, but it's big enough. It's like Barcelona, Madrid, or Milano, Amsterdam. These are all the cities that experienced the similar crisis and the similar movements emerged around the same time. It's called municipalism, right? And then they, I think, created some inspiration for Asian societies like Tokyo, and focusing on more public transportation, public spaces, so the more secure access to housing. And these are the things that I think are very important for any sustainable city. And I was very happy to see like that you guys have too many public spaces. It's like every 50 meters, you guys have a park, it's just empty spaces, and people are just hanging out, kids playing around. I think you don't recognize how precious these things are when you live in the city, but I come from Tokyo, so they find any empty space, they try to build something new, right? And it's always higher and higher, so you don't even see the blue sky. Even the sky is commodified. You have to see the sky only by you buy the very expensive,
To see the sky, you have to pay.
Exactly. So I mean, in that sense, I still see a lot of people create like a local community and then bicycle lanes, and I still have to defend Barcelona in front of you guys.
Okay. I have to say, you said that Japan was quite conservative compared to Barcelona or Catalonia or Spain. I've been shocked also to understand that Japan has some of the most interesting academical approaches to Marxism.
Yes.
Which is, to our perspective, I mean, I don't know, a European perspective, we believed Japan like a lead capitalist society, not really interested in Marxism or communism.
Yeah, Japan has a very unique tradition of university academic Marxism. So that Japan after.
But why is that?
It's because during the World War II, those communists or Marxists kept fighting against imperial power. So many people went to jail. Some of them even got killed and so on. But they, of course, many converted and so on. But many also kept fighting. And after the kind of liberation, or after the end of the World War II, they became some kind of symbol, intellectual symbol of freedom, autonomy, and freedom of thinking, and so on. So after the war, those people who are in jail or who lost their jobs all came back to the universities, and that kind of created some Marxist renaissance. So if you see the Department of Economics at the University of Tokyo, all those people were almost like Marxian economists. Really? And then they studied, and then all the students became bureaucrats. And then they did some kind of planning, and then that was some kind of basis of Japanese economic miracle in the 60s and 70s. So we have some interesting tradition, but which had also unfortunate consequences, which is it became kind of contained within university. So it kind of lost the direct contact with the social movements. And that is why after the 90s, when the Soviet collapsed, and even the academic legitimacy of socialist ideas became much weaker, it just got wiped away. And so now today, I'm the only Marxist scholar at the University of Tokyo. It used to be like 80%, and now it's like 1%. So you see the dramatic transformation. But at the same time, it's the reason why my book became so popular, is that people do have some exposure to the Marxist ideas when they were students, especially if you are like a little older. And
it was like a comeback.
Exactly. And then I didn't repeat the old same thing. I studied in Germany, and I looked at new materials, like Marx's unpublished notebooks on natural sciences to connect to ecological issues. So this ecological reading of Karl Marx really resonated with the moment of the COVID pandemic in the 2020, because that was a moment of health crisis, moment of inequality. But COVID is obviously the ecological crisis, right? So really it had a very timely appearance in Japan, and that's how it became bestseller.
And now, do you think that there is any sympathy around the degrowth movement in Japan?
So this is what I've been really trying hard when I talk about communism, some people are like, communism.
Yeah,
and then I say degrowth, actually. And it's like, it's like two most unpopular thing. And they're like, why do you use
concepts and you just stick together? So it's like the great monster now.
I have many friends at the University of Autonomous University in Barcelona. That they have some like degrowth group, right? And they are not so happy because I talk about communism all the time, and they are like, don't connect degrowth and communism. But what I've been trying to do is change the image, basically, because philosophy is, it's not usually very useful, but important, because we only think with concepts. And then it means it matters a lot. So we associate communism or degrowth with very negative images. You basically lose the capacity to think beyond capitalism. So for me, it was very important to redefine the concept of communism or Marxism and even degrowth. For example, degrowth is often associated with austerity, poverty, and frugality. But I emphasize degrowth is actually abundance. It's abundance of free spaces, community, and housing, public housing, of course, and public transportation, and so on. So this is creating more commons. And then the abundance of commons is actually communism, because abundance of commodity, abundance of money, abundance of capital is capitalism, right? So if we have this abundance of commons, we could define this new society as already some new form of communism. So it's just a basic, simple thing, but at the same time, that really creates us some possibility to talk about new policies, new practices, new movements from a different perspective.
I'll go back to, obviously, the growth and communism, but let me ask you, or start to the beginning. I've read most of your current political, philosophical, and economical interest emerged as a consequence of two big events. One, the 2008 economic crisis,
right,
and Lehman Brothers, and the other one was the Fukushima nuclear accident. Is that true, those two?
Yes, because I went to the college in 2005, and that's how I started reading Marxism a little bit. But then at the time, I was paying more attention to inequality, because there was, at the time, there are a lot of deregulation and many precarious workers emerging in Japanese economy. And then 2008 was, for me, the moment of confirmation that the capitalist crisis even expands more inequality, creates disasters for the weaker people. That's how I decided to study Marxism at in Berlin. But only in the 2011, the moment of the Fukushima nuclear disaster, that I came to recognize that my focus was obviously too narrow, because only paying attention to working class exploitation is not enough, because of course, but at the time, I didn't really pay attention that there are many different kinds of inequality and asymmetry. One is Tokyo and Fukushima, like a town, big city, and the countryside. The Fukushima electricity basically generated all the electricity to Tokyo, and the Fukushima people never used the electricity generated in the nuclear power plants. But all the risk, damages, just is externalized to the people in Fukushima. And then, after paying that kind of attention, I had to think more about the relationship between human and nature. This kind of like gigantic technology, like nuclear power plant, really rather created disaster instead of progress. So even today, some American socialists argue for nuclear power plants in socialism. But for me, that was the moment that I have to be more critical of certain technologies, which created, of course, tension with this Marxist idea of technology is always good. It's basis for emancipation.
Marxism and communism asks for growth.
Growth, right? So that's how I actually had to think about it. I have to abandon Marxism and so on. So there was a kind of moment of identity crisis. But I went to Germany, and then there I started studying or editing Marx Engels Gesamtausgabe, which is the complete works of Marx and Engels. And they publish letters, manuscripts, but also notebooks, which have been basically ignored, even by scholars. And now we are editing and publishing those notebooks. Then one of them actually contains a lot of notebooks on natural sciences. Here, Marx became more critical of technologies because these technologies are often utilized for the sake of exploiting more from the soil, cutting more trees, or even leading to some kind of extinction of species and so on. So that's how I started to integrate the Marx's critique of technology, capitalist technology, to his vision of socialism, which I call eco-socialism.
But that's really unknown since this place, because Marxism or communism, as we said, is based like capitalism in growth in technology, just to give that wealth to everyone and common things. But you say that in the last years of his life, he just turned around that idea.
Exactly. So to some extent, of course, in capitalism, there's a lot of pollution of water, air, and many issues related to the environment. Mm-hmm. So it's not like that new that I said Marx was critical of ecology as such, but I think the real contribution is the following, which is the degrowth part. Because then, you become critical of some capitalist technology, and then you used to believe that the technological development is always better. Mm-hmm. It's good for socialism and so on.
It's progress.
But if you realize that this technology under capitalism is rather destroying planet, exploiting more from workers, is it really progress? Mm-hmm. Marx's vision of historical progress was in a deep crisis. So that's why he didn't publish in the last years of his life, but he started studying more and more on the ecological questions. But at the same time, he also studied things like non-Western pre-capitalist societies. Like he studied societies in Russia, India, of course, but also even like indigenous society in North America. And what he actually recognized is that, we have this famous thing, the Iroquois Federation, the people actually shared everything, and they always think about 7 generations ahead. So this kind of society is actually quite not only equal, but also super sustainable. Mm-hmm. It really transformed Marx's vision, because Marx used to think that this society is just stagnating, no technological progress, no history, it's boring. So he thinks that it must be first destroyed by British capitalism. But now he changed his view. Okay, this society is presenting a model for the future for Western societies. We have to learn from the principles of equality, solidarity, and freedom, and sustainability. So these are the basic principles from the indigenous society that Marx now thinks that the key principles of the future society. So it's not that new society is no longer characterized by constant or infinite growth or technological progress. Rather, it's about solidarity, fraternity, and sustainability. So I called it basically degrowth communism.
You have just said about the Fukushima accident that you realized that in Fukushima they were presenting all the energy that Tokyo needed, but without any good things, but all the bad things. No? You in the book you just said that this was externalized or a transfer that you can extend to everything else, the global north and the global south.
So once you recognize this structure, basically the same thing happens everywhere, like fast fashion, Zara, Mango, these things. We enjoy it, but at the same time they say, let's do recycling, so no worries, you can buy new ones because we do recycle, we use organic cottons and so on. But what happens is actually, even producing organic cotton is not good for the environment. It uses a lot of water, and that's the same for electric vehicles. If you produce too many electric vehicles, it just requires so much energy, resources, and water. But that's often taking place in countries like India, Bangladesh, or Chile, Bolivia. So you don't really see it. You usually forget just putting your clothes in the recycling box, right? So, but actually this is a very good way of continuing today's way of life, which is organized for the maximization of growth and profit. But once you recognize this global relations of exploitation, global north-south, big cities and countryside, I think even the new technologies simply do not offer the solution. That's how I was more optimistic about technology. Even after Fukushima, I was kind of supporter of Green New Deal. But 2018, 19, that was a moment, global climate strike, Greta Thunberg and so on, really demanded much more radical transformation. And I thought, I realized that investing more in renewable energy will solve the issue, create more jobs, higher salaries. It's not very radical. It's rather the continuation of today's way of life. So the new way of life must be much more different. That's why I think Marx had to look at non-Western society to imagine. He was not simply nostalgic, right? He's not like, oh, Indian people look so good. No, it's not the case.
They're always happy and so on.
No, it's not this kind of romanticization. Rather, he was trying to find out different ideas of equality, different ways of sustainability. You know, sustainability doesn't have to be based on the massive technologies like nuclear power plants or electric vehicles. Bicycles can be a new technology. And it doesn't have to be so romantic, right? If you really, that requires a lot of planning, like 15-minute cities. This is something, or you need a lot of public transportation and so on. These are still projects of modernization, but it's a very different kind. And I think this is something what we really need today. And I hope that degrowth communism becomes some kind of inspiration for that.
You just said the Green New Deal. I believe that climate change seems, in fact, in popular opinion, something that can be undone. But the dominant point of view is that maybe can be slowed down, maybe eventually stopped if some major changes are made, mainly decarbonization of energy substitution with the system of renewable energy. Of course, this is not being easy because we're seeing everyday governments pushing forward some of these goals. But what you claim is that even if we did that, it wouldn't be enough.
It's probably not enough because of the reason that I said that even producing electric vehicles requires like a lot of resources, different kind of resources, and especially from the global south. So that will produce different kind of ecological imperialism. And we have to recognize that this development of capitalism is deeply rooted to the issue of colonial domination. So Marx was looking at the indigenous society at the moment when the indigenous Iroquois Federation had a much more equal and also matriarchal, so gender equality, but also sustainable thinking beyond the 7th generation and so on. But this primitive accumulation basically destroyed and then brought in patriarchy, extraction of resources, monopolization of lands and so on. And these things are basically what's going on today, most obviously in Gaza, but also in other areas of our world. So often I think the technology is often associated with emancipation and progress and freedom, but it's possible that it really impoverishes our imagination too. So we can only imagine a better society with technology. But maybe there are other possibilities. And my point is basically capitalism often marginalizes other possibility of technological progress. I'm not saying we should all go back to bicycle time. We need electric vehicles. We need many new technology, renewable energy, and so on. But capitalism often has difficulty implementing solar power because solar power is hard to make it profitable. But also capitalism wastes so much money and resources by investing more in the project, like going to Mars. It's not something that we should do when we are having this burning planet in front of us. So capitalism becomes sometimes very inefficient in terms of resource and labor power allocation. And my idea of coming back to this tradition of socialism and communism is bringing back the tradition of planning. We should distinguish what's more necessary for everyone and what's actually not so necessary, even if this is profitable, and then focus more on what's necessary is the first path to degrowth society. So I'm not saying that slowing down means slowing down everything. We shouldn't slow down internet, obviously not. We need high-speed internet for everyone. So that's like a decommodification of knowledge and so on. But so that we shouldn't, overgeneralize all the categories, like degrowth, slow down, and so on.
So let's say if in an optimistic way, in 5-10 years, which won't happen, I believe, we ban everywhere in the world conventional petrol-driven cars, all vehicles, even planes and ships, turn electric. We stop everywhere the use of petrol. We open photovoltaic plants and enough to close every gas pipe, every nuclear plant. It won't be enough. This is the point of view. But so when we're talking about climate change, I believe that there's two dominant ideas in public to tackle it. One is the Green New Deal, so basically spending a lot of public resources to achieve some kind of technology that can clean renewable energy and so. And also there are the so-called Sustainable Development Goals, here are called els Objectius de Desenvolupament Sostenible, Agenda 2030, etc., that want to tackle every single crisis, not only climate change. But in your book, you're really critic with them.
Yeah, because these things are becoming often the tool of greenwashing or some kind of like human rights washing. So meaning that it doesn't really have the true impact to transform the society. Rather, as I said, the fast fashion companies talk about recycling or organic cottons when the obvious solution to this overproduction of clothes is to reduce or ban the fast fashion. And we still have many clothes, right? But even public spending, increasing public spending for renewable energy and then technologies is also important. I'm also supportive of this idea. But if you just do subsidize, it's not enough, because what happens when you subsidize electric vehicles? The car companies produce the bigger cars because you get some subsidized, so then you might buy a little more expensive car. So they try to sell bigger SUVs and so on. And then the poor people don't have the opportunity to buy a car anyway, because even subsidized is not enough. So that actually expands inequality. So we really have to become more radical in the sense that we demand at the same time not only subsidize, but also ban SUVs or invest in certain things like public transportation so that everyone has the same capacity for mobility and so on. But often this kind of discussion about public spending doesn't include this idea of equality. And then things like SDGs often marginalizes people's participation too. It's only like UN experts gather and then they decide what's good for us. No, it's not. We know what we want. We know what actually how our society should look like. We have much more concrete visions than those people sitting in New York City, right? So I think it's much more important to create spaces and opportunities like climate assembly or like Barcelona Commune. The citizens gather and to talk about planning for the future. And I think that's something that I want to defend as a way of transforming society, not like top-down revolution, but a way of democratic participation and planning.
There is also another theory around, which is the acceleration theory. It says we have to spend even more and more resources, more and more economic growth just to get a point in which innovation and new technologies can solve what now cannot.
Yeah, I think they're a little bit, sick, they're mentally sick, because because they hate capitalism, because they want to establish some kind of post-capitalist society by accelerating technology or by even maximizing capitalist development. And then I think the future will be hyper-capitalism, right? And they somehow think that it's good for people. I think that's why I think they are a little bit, some mental problem. I think it's just like domestic violence, and it's bad, but then they still think that we need that partner. It's obviously not. We should imagine something much more different. We should recognize that these technologies do not bring about well-being and satisfaction. It's a very good way of manipulating us to more consumption, more working, and So my problem is basically, if you had an opportunity, which kind of society do you want to live? You just fully electricized, fully renewable, but you have to work 50 hours per week to produce all the renewable energies and electric vehicles. Or at a society that you have public transportation, that you have 15-minute city, and then you work like 30 hours. And in Japan, people would still say 50 hours, we like working. But what I'm trying to do is try to change the desire. I'm not saying that the people would naturally go for the latter option, but I think for many reasons that I discussed, like not only ecological reasons, but also for our mental, social reasons, I think the second option could be more attractive for, many societies.
But that means that basically capitalism can solve the problem in any ways, so it must be applied to another regime, which is that the growth communism. The fact is, how do you achieve to change a regime which has been in the charge for 100 years?
So that's my, I get often criticism from the left-wing people because I don't advocate for revolution. And
violent revolution.
Because for me, this expansion of commons is important. So even if you have more public transport, free public transportation, and you ban Airbnb, and then you have much more social housing and so on, I think the Barcelona would be like the best city in the world if after that. But now I live in Germany, and they are rich, but food, weather, I think if you have choice, people should choose, rational people choose Spain, right? But the problem is, I think, still, Barcelona would be quite capitalist. You guys have markets, you guys still have hotels, and So I'm not saying that we could easily imagine a society without market, without money, and without commodity. I think the future society, we will still have those things. And then for some Marxist people, it's not radical enough. It's just some kind of tamed capitalism or something like that. But I think it really creates different kind of dynamics, that our life is no longer driven by the sense of anxiety, because we always have to think about money, how do we pay rent, how do we pay for education, how do we pay for, I don't know. So this anxiety is gone, then I think we will behave in a much more different way.
You said that you wouldn't ban internet, for instance, but maybe you will recognize that part of this anxiety, consumism anxiety, comes from social networks and the possibility to buy 24 hours, 7 days a week that internet provides.
Yeah, so my recent theory, or it's not theory, it's not theorized. My recent intuition is we should probably ban AI. AI makes people...
Should be banned.
AI makes students really stupid. And because it's really true, right? Now you assign the reading, and then they ask AI to summarize the reading assignment, and then it really destroys our capacity for critical thinking. So in that sense, I'm very close to Yanis Varoufakis. I don't use the term techno-feudalism because it's this really maximalization of capitalism, what we are witnessing. But at the same time, it's really dangerous in a sense that all the information, and if the information is manipulated, it's very easy to manipulate our desires too. They know, those tech platforms know what we want, all the recommendations. So they can really manipulate without us realizing that they are manipulating. And it's a very dangerous situation. So,
but that happens in social networks too.
Exactly. So maybe we can add to the list of banning the social network too. But I don't want to emphasize too much about ban things because it sounds like really like Stalinist, right? I want to make the project much exciting. We create more commons instead of ban meat, ban.
But
we have to.
In the end, you have to at some point.
Yeah, but I'm not I'm not the position to decide what to be banned, right? Okay. You guys decide in a democratic way, but rather, I would be more interested in creating those public spaces, public transportation, like more of expansion, or maybe maybe we can imagine a more public digital platforms, right? Maybe we can create a space where we have more sovereignty or control over what kind of data that the platform are allowed to extract from us. And this is a kind of common idea of, digital social, like platform socialism.
But sometimes when we are looking for a change that radical, we need like something to imagine. How's the life in that society, which is the growth and communist? So in basic things like private property, in your sense, it has to be a private
They just
property.
remain, but we should share more of, like cars, we can share. And we can, of course, share much more many things. But at the same time, we shouldn't, there's no necessity to fully abolish private property. I mean, it's almost absurd to imagine, right? So just in that sense, it's a continuation. Of course, I'm not saying that we should abandon all the technologies too. But the point is, I think this acceleration of today's digital technology, like digital platforms and AI, they are also often very ecologically harmful. And it's very hard for me to imagine that these AI will provide a better society. It's really becoming a tool for top 1% of the people. And for now we should probably ban, but we should also at the same time think how we can make AI a common property. And Barcelona also has this thing, right? Like more like waste. You gather data, like you guys gather, like Amsterdam and Barcelona has like a decidim, and then you also gather data about waste and electricity to make it more efficient. And these are, I think, the good way of utilizing platforms and AI.
You say in the book that communism, the word, is not the most popular term right now. In the United States, it's nearly an insult. And Europe is also seen like as the system Soviet Union proved to be wrong.
Right.
So why do you think this opinion can be overturned?
So maybe my simple reason, I'm a Marxist, and my specialty, as a researcher, I'm a, scholar of socialist and ideas and so on. So it's for me very natural to talk about those things. I don't want to hide my real belief. And then, so I know that many people tell me actually don't use those words. It's inefficient. It doesn't. It creates misunderstanding and confusion and so on. But at the same time, it makes it quite clear that the future society should be something really different. But at the same time, I want to defend that the communism is something always existing, even in our society. I think
it hasn't disappeared.
No, disappeared. I think I would even say that the capitalism is established based on communism. if you look at the family relationship, or if you look at the friendship, if you look at the university, we help each other. We get joy from learning from each other, and then create communities, do activities. And these are just like a daily normal life, but that's not inherent to the logic of capitalism, because capitalism is about money, creating more capital and so on. So this kind of relationship has been under severe attack. University under financial attack, deregulated, the tuition becoming higher and higher and so on. So these are really the way of attacking universities. Like America now, it's very extreme. But I think communism is not something that we can achieve only after revolution. Communism is still here. That's why I argue that it's possible to expand the existing commons. And in that sense, so I don't really think that, we should keep using this word, because it's just there. And it's a very important aspect of our life. But since we don't use the term, we don't recognize it either. So I'm just basically inviting us to recognize the marginalized aspects of our life, and then focus on this so that we can expand them.
So let me, the joke that you play a hard game because you've been criticized by far-right neoliberal, of course, defenders. You've been criticized by ecologists who believe capitalism can be reformed with sustainable goals. You've been criticized by ecologists who are not degrowth defenders. You've been criticized by degrowth defenders that are not Marxists. Exactly. And you've been criticized by Marxists who are not degrowth defenders.
Exactly. So I'm criticized from all over.
You have enemies everywhere right now.
But that means that that means that we are creating something new, right? It's something that doesn't quite fit to any existing ideas. I'm, of course, deeply indebted to socialist Marxist tradition and degrowth people. I really learned a lot. But at the same time, there has been some missing things. And then by really combining, this is maybe interdisciplinary, if I use the fashionable terms, this interdisciplinary perspective creates a new room, like space, for new ideas. And I think this, what you just said, like critiques from different directions, really the confirmation for that. So I'm very happy that I get a lot of criticism.
I have to say that I was pretty much interested in what kind of societies can emerge when climate emergency gets to a certain point where the crisis is really felt everywhere, really strong. So you say that there are like 4 ways that a society can appear. You tell climate Maoist, which is like strong government reaction, searching for equality. Then you say that you can be a climate fascist, which is strong state power or government, but searching for inequality.
Yeah, the protection of the power already.
Of course, the rich people. There is the barbaric society, which is less state power, searching for inequality. The biggest
it's
win
basically chaos. Yeah.
Is basically chaos. And there is another one, which is the one you propose, the degrowth. And you say that here we are in with students that 5 years ago felt a really big crisis that wasn't, we didn't see it coming, which is the pandemic. And you say that the reactions of the governments can be aligned with some of these positions. Like in China, they were more like Maoist. They had strong government, but searching for equality. And United States with Trump was the other side, like fascist, no? But it's like a test that how can react to a real big crisis.
And we are failing in this test. So that meaning that we are now heading to either climate fascism or barbarism scenario. Because the main difference, this book, as I said, I wrote 5 years ago. And at that moment, we still had some very small window of hope that with the experience of pandemic, with the experience of climate change, climate movements, we could somehow achieve rapid decarbonization by the middle of the century. But after pandemic, what happened? Just war in Ukraine, genocide in Gaza, the world is divided, and then this hyper-normalization is really taking place. There's a great rain and flood in Valencia, right? But then people don't really talk about it in relation to climate change. That's the same in LA wildfire. People just get used to these extreme events now. So the situation is really bad, but the climate change doesn't stop. So last year, the average temperature is higher than 1.5 degrees Celsius, meaning that our Paris Agreement is basically failing. I don't think now we will lose 4 more years because of Trump, and I don't think it's possible to achieve 2.0 either. So the future will be very difficult. I'm working on a new book now, which is, as a consequence, much darker, because I discussed with this book, it's either degrowth communism or barbarism, or degrowth communism or fascism. I think today, even if we could somehow establish degrowth communism in the next 20, 30 years, we can't avoid barbarism to some extent.
We can't.
Cannot.
Really?
Because we are really, overshooting many important ecological thresholds. So communism can be only established in barbarism. So communism or socialism in barbarism is the new future. So that's the topic of my new book.
Well,
very positive reaction.
No, of course. No, because you said that there was chaos. In that principle you said for the 4 possible reactions in a state, the fascist reaction to protect the powerful, the Maoist to search for equality but with the state power, the barbaric, which is basically chaos, and degrowth communism. You say that basically at some point state power won't be working. At some point the climate change is attacking infrastructures and so on. At some point governments won't be able to apply not even Maoist or fascist possibilities.
I think, I would say that now, so it's also reflecting on the kind of the weakness of my previous book, because, the problem is we have to make a rapid transformation, but at the same time, we didn't have enough agency, political agency at that time. So that's why I paid attention to cities like Barcelona. It's not like super small, but it's not like a state, so it's like a middle. But now these movements are also kind of going down, and we are really going back to cooperatives, eco-villages, and like local movements. And these things alone can no longer really face the big planetary crisis coming in the next decades. So I actually acknowledge that we have to discuss more openly about the role of the state in the future kind of mitigation to the climate crisis. But the point is basically, even we have a strong state, the disaster or like the situation of barbarism will be quite big and like damaging. So I don't think like, for example, I don't think like a Trump administration, even no matter how powerful they are, can really manage this crisis. And it's the same with China. They couldn't really contain even the pandemic. So it's quite unlikely that this kind of the state power alone would be sufficient. But at the same time, I should have more dealt with this equation in the previous book. But I didn't, so now I'm trying to incorporate that aspect.
I think we have to start finishing the conference, I think. But I have to ask a personal question, because you came here with your family and your children. The engine of your thoughts and and the need to find a solution starts when you got kids, or not?
Yeah, I think it makes it more personal as well. I think maybe, but of course the whole point is not simply about my kids, so it's more about
Of course not, but maybe
global north and south, and it's also generational inequality. It's it's all about structures and so on. But yeah, having some personal tie. Of course, I look at the Fukushima thing. I had some friends in Fukushima, and then my relatives lived near from Fukushima, and these things make it much more personal, right? And then you think more about sustainability, disaster, capitalism, and so on. So it's always helpful to start with something concrete, but I think what helps to study philosophy is to overcome this personal dimension, right? I mean, it makes it much more abstract, and then being abstract is also sometimes very important because it just creates some possibility to connect with those ideas 150 years ago, for me, like Marx, and to bring these ideas back to the reality, to think about future society. And I think, it doesn't have to be philosophy. It can be literature, it can be history, it can be politics, or anything. And these things are very essential to not only to understand today's situation, but also to imagine a different kind of future.
The last question, you told about the situation in the universities in the United States, which is very bad right now, and appear to be like with the protest of Palestine and so on. You come from Germany right now. So what is the situation there? Because it's a country that is it's a subject not easy to talk about.
Yeah, so I was surprised that I attended the Lateral Festival, book festival. And then I got some interviews, and then they really openly talk about Gaza genocide, and then they put flags and so on. And in Germany, it's not possible. So I was also like, for me, Germany is a very concrete model of modern Western kind of progress, because they did something very stupid during the World War II, but then they try to recover and many things, and then they had a very good philosophical traditions, and how that idea of modern enlightenment can be reintroduced into their own society, changing constitutions, and then apologizing for the historical responsibilities. And then I often contrasted that kind of historical experience in Germany with the Japanese experience after World War II, because they didn't really admit the historical responsibilities of the war. They, changed the textbooks in a favorable way to more reformist right-wing ideas and so on. So for me, the Germany was always a good model. And that's why I studied not only Marx, but also those other German philosophers and so on. But now looking at the situation, and also my philosopher friends talking about these issues, it's very disappointing. And it really even gives me this impression that this idea, the Western idea of democracy, sovereignty, human rights, and these good ideas are just a tool, just an instrument for protecting the interests of the Western ruling class. And that's really bad. Japan is like very close to Western ideas, and then I am spending many years in European countries, and then still I get this impression that these modern ideas of universality and so on are almost like hypocritical, right? That means that if you go to China, if you go to Latin America, if you go to other countries, they really think in this way, right? So I'm really confused. I'm very sad, but I came to Spain, and then it's very different, so that really gave me some hope too.
I was going to ask about that, because normally when we're discussing about left and right and progress and other types of idea, young people, students, embrace usually, well, it's a cliche, but they embrace like leftist policies. But we've seen in the last maybe, and you've been in Europe last year, in the last, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years, that a lot of youngsters are embracing the contrary.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
Well, they should read more Marx. Let's say, yeah, a lot of anxiety and a lot of, society changing in a bad way. People become sometimes conservative, but it's also mainly male, like boys, that they think that somehow the women are taking more advantage from these changes and so on. But we often don't recognize how much advantages we always have. So I think it's very important to look at other parts of the world. For me, it was very important to recognize how, this inequality between global north and south is really so huge. And learning this or unlearning our privileges is, at first, maybe painful, because you have to criticize yourself and so on. But at the same time, that really creates new values, and that opens to new relationship with others, maybe creating new societies. So I think that's the whole point of learning process. And I hope that, there's no way that I can be sure, but I hope that we will overcome these hardships.
Are you a tactical optimism then?
Yeah, but my new book will be dark, so be careful.
Dr. Kohei Saito, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. Gràcies a tothom també per seguir.